Well, good afternoon and welcome to Staff Chat episode 16. It is a beautiful fall afternoon and we are excited to be with you today. We're about halfway into our study of the Beatitudes. And the reason we chose this study is because we feel like that when Jesus gave that Sermon on the Mount, that the things that he shared, the Beatitudes, were ways that flipped the script in the life of people as they had always known it. It took what they thought they believed and really just did a 180 and changed it. And so, we do believe that having a relationship with Christ should flip things in our life, should turn our focus and our way of thinking to be more like Christ. And so today I'm going to open up a question of how has Christ flipped the script in your life? Perhaps it was when you first accepted Jesus into your life and you had just a complete revelation of some sort, or maybe it's something that happened shortly after or that's happened recently. I believe I was once told that we should always be flipping the script. Jesus should always be doing that in our life. And so just going to open that up and see who wants to go first and let's share.
I'll go first. I think I'm pretty sure I've shared this story in a sermon somewhere along the way, but when I was in college, I was planning for a career in the foreign service. I was a Russian major and had that all pretty well mapped out. And, I was a believer, but I don't know that I necessarily thought of that as my calling, but I felt like it was in sync with who God made me to be. And that's where I was headed. And I was living on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It was in the late 80s. And so homelessness is always a significant issue. But in that period of time, homeless people were very visible on the streets of New York City. And I was walking down Broadway one day and there were so many people that, you just kind of moved as a crowd. Just sort of propelled down the street. And before I realized it, I had found myself stepping over a man who was lying on the sidewalk. And I was about halfway down the street when, I just stopped in my tracks and realized that I had just, in this sort of swift pace of my life, stepped over a human being who was lying on the street. And it was a moment that God's hand was all over for me and completely flipped the script of my life. I finished my degree, but from that day, I knew that I would commit myself to, at that moment, homeless ministry. And I went back and that's what I did when I got out of school. And the rest of my calling has sort of unfolded, but it was in that one moment that God changed everything in my life.
So mine is it's similar in the way that it kind of encompasses my first calling, Jane. I think some of you might know this story, but it's the story of how God flipped the script from me thinking that my life was going to go in the direction of music education and going in the direction of ministry. What I haven't really told many people about is how that actually happened. So I was at ECU at the time. I'd grown up my whole life learning that as long as I worked hard enough and as long as I buckled down and really put my nose to the grindstone, then I would be successful in whatever I did. And, I got to my junior year of college and I had, all these different responsibilities. I was singing at least 6 or 7 hours a day, lots of different jobs and singing in 4 different ensembles in the opera and everything. And I got to this point where I just hit a wall and I became overwhelmed by everything in my life. And what I didn't realize at the time is that some of the anxiety and depression that runs in my mother's side of the family was catching up to me. And so I kept putting my nose down. I kept working hard and I kept trying to get ahead, but I couldn't because of everything that was starting to pile up. And so I ended up having to take a break from classes. I I wasn't in school for about 2 years there, still living in Greenville and just working at a couple churches and Chick-fil-A to make ends meet. And it was actually during that time that my parents forced me to go and see someone and to seek help. And I'm a big believer that God never wants us to do something by ourselves. That I think that was God's indication to me that no, Stephen, you can't be prideful. You can't think that you're going to accomplish these things by yourself. That's not how the world works, even though the world might be telling you that. And so, I turn to Matthew 7, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will be found. And it's the one of the most simple things that Jesus said, but I think it needs to inform what we're thinking more often. And also there's the passage about not leaning on our own understanding, where God truly wants us to turn to him. And once I started in that direction, once I started to turn to God, and once I started to ask people for help, I was blessed beyond imagination. And now here I am. I mean, I've been so blessed ever since I decided to start not leaning on my own understanding 8 years ago. So
my story has some similar themes to that, Stephen. I've shared it on occasion that my father moved out when I was 5, so I had an absentee father that I was constantly trying to earn his trust and earn his approval. And so I'd write letters and make phone calls, and when he'd come to visit, I'd try to impress him with all the things I was doing in school, and that didn't accomplish anything. But I did have a grandfather that loved me unconditionally, but he also had a really strong work ethic. His Scottish Irish Presbyterian work ethic passed on to me. And so I just assumed that the relationship with God was the same way, that you have to work hard for it. And if I got good enough, then I would make it to heaven. And it wasn't until I started attending a little Baptist church, the Lake Forest Baptist, in fact, with Enan, that I actually heard that by grace you're saved through faith, and it's not your own doing. It is a gift of God, so no one could boast. And that's when God really flipped the script for me and opened me up that his love was unconditional. He had to remind me years later when, by reminding me that he is still the father of the fatherless. That even later on, when I was still trying to earn his approval, that he reminded me I don't have to prove anything, that he loves me just the way I was. So he's still teaching me that day by day.
I had a experience this past Saturday that allowed me, and I guess maybe led me to go back to that time where God had flipped the script for me. I had rushed up to Wake Forest on Saturday for the funeral, the celebration of life of Beth McLeod. And Beth was the director of the preschool at Southeastern Seminary. Back when I was at Southeastern, back in 1980, 81, her husband, Gene, was the librarian there at the seminary. And I didn't know that the seminary even had a cemetery until this past Saturday when I was there. And that's where they interred the ashes of Beth McLeod. So while I was there, I walked around there in that cemetery, and I saw the grave markers of people that were my professors when I was in school there. I was only a mile maybe from the seminary, and I'd not been back to the seminary in a long time. So I decided I would just ride over there. So I rode over, I parked, and I walked around on the campus, and all of a sudden my mind went back to when I was there as a student so many years ago, and I encountered 2 young couples there on the campus. And I looked a lot different Saturday than I did when I was in school there. The students that I met looked a lot like me when I was there. They probably looked a little bit better taken care of than the way I looked, because I had this idea that I was in seminary there as a stepping stone to doing something I wanted to do. And it wasn't necessarily something that God was calling me to do. So as I walked around the campus there, these 2 couples walked with me, and I was wearing my suit on Saturday, and the white shirt and the tie, and I guess I looked the part of the 60-year-old pastor, if you will. And they asked me to tell them what it was like when I was in school there back then. And so I told them of how I was resisting God calling me to vocational ministry in a church. And I was convinced there was no way I would ever do that. Neither of these two couples have an idea of working in the church at all. They said that they're following God's Spirit that's leading them to some type of vocation in a Christian community, and they didn't know what that was going to look like. You know, one of the couples thinking maybe they're going to go to Europe and serve there somewhere, and they're not even sure where. And so as I talked with them, as I walked around that campus, as I remembered my days there at Southeastern, I was young again. And at the same time, I reflected upon the fact that so often, you know, we have this idea that we're going to do this and we want God to bless it. Whereas we need to open ourselves to God and allow God to bless us by following that which God leads us to. And honestly, I was the most frustrated probably that I've ever been when I was doing the thing that I wanted to do and doing the campus ministry thing, and had never felt more blessed by God than I have in my ministry in what I called, when I got here to First Baptist, probably the highest steeple, most formal church I'd ever been a part of in my life. And the worship service that was that way, but the people were the most loving, caring, generous, compassionate people that I could ever be a part of. And I realized that I needed that more than anything else in order to be fulfilled, in order to be filled, in order to be that which God has called me to be. And that is to be a fully devoted follower of Christ. So yeah, I got to go back there on Saturday and be reminded. That old switch, it's old. It doesn't look like the new ones. I mean, it's an old worn out switch, and it's got some cracks and stuff like that on it. But I'm so glad that God flipped it then, and I get to continue living in the light of God's grace every day. So thanks for asking that question today, Jeannie.
I'll go next. I was thinking the other day that I've only been a member of 2 churches in my whole life. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and was there for 25 years, went to college there, went to graduate school there, and was a member of the church. And it was very comfortable. You know, when you grow up in a church as a little baby, my dad helped nail the floorboards onto the church when he was a young man before I was born. And so it was, you know, it's easy to get comfortable. And I was asked to do a lot of leadership stuff. And so, and then when I accepted the call to come to First Baptist as the youth minister, I remember talking to these guys. This guy gave class, and they said the average term, I guess, of a youth minister was 18 months. And they say, that's terrible. You know, that they taught us that think 5 years. You need to go somewhere and serve God 5 years. And which 5 years sounded like a long time to me. So I got in my MG that I bought when I was 19, and had my shotgun and my water ski and my double knit plaid suit, my only suit I had, and took off from Memphis 1,000 miles to Wilmington on the coast, from the river, Mississippi River to the coast. And before I came across the bridge, I pulled off the side of the road and just had a prayer to God that I would commit this time, however long it was, to Him, and that I would ask Him to bless the work I did. And there was back to songs, there was a song that we used to sing called Not to Us, oh God, but to Your name be glory. And I prayed that prayer that God would give me that spirit, that nothing I did or what happened would be give glory to Him. And then I asked that God would give me a pure and holy life. And then because I came, and this was my very first job. I mean, I taught water skiing at a camp up in Maine for 5 summers, if you call that a job. And I refereed basketball games and baseball games part-time, but this was really the first job I've ever had. And so God, that was really a flip of my switch, where I just came and with really no clue what I was going to do, just started doing things I like to do and just asked people to join me, and have loved it ever since. So that was just a big flip of the switch in my life when I pulled off the side of that road and asked God to bless my time in Wilmington.
I'll go. I can think of a lot of different flip the switch moments, but one that I probably haven't shared very much is about how God put in my heart just a desire to be a mom and to have a family. And so we had this we decided we were ready to start a family. And so we started to pursue adoption as our first way of doing that. And so we started looking at international adoption options, and every door closed. And we started looking at domestic options and foster care options, and all the doors kept shutting in our face. And so then we decided, well, maybe we heard God wrong. So maybe we'll try to have a child more traditionally. And it just seemed like for more than a few years that nothing was leading to our having a family. And it was a challenging time. We really felt like God had put that in us, that desire to be parents. And so eventually we, after many moments of heartache and some failed adoptions and some things that just fell through over and over, we matched with our birth parents who have become a part of our life, and who gifted us with our greatest gift in Nadia. And then through several years after that, we, now if you know our story, we have 4 kids. And so who'd have ever thought 11 years ago that God would have flipped the script in our story and we would be parents to 4 amazing kids. There was a lot of loss and heartache along the way. And I guess the encouragement is that every single one was in God's perfect time and perfect way. And we're grateful, and it's our source of greatest joy. Even though there was a lot of challenge along the road, we wouldn't change anything about it.
I can go. I remember being in undergraduate, and I was an undecided major, and that meant Faith Beam, the college campus minister at Campbell, was my advisor, because I was undecided, meaning I had no clue what I was doing, and seemed appropriate because in life I had no clue what I was doing. I had decided I wanted to go into youth ministry, student ministry, work with teenagers, but somehow in high school, like I stuck with the idea, but then later on in high school, I had changed my plan. I'm not going to do this whole divinity school thing. I don't even need to study that. I can go be a business major and make lots of money and also do ministry on the side or something like that. I just, whatever. But I still kind of figured it would be an idea or a part of my plan, but anyway, it didn't work out. So I got to college, was undecided. I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing. And then Faith Beam, I actually took her Intro to Christianity class, because all students at Campbell have to take Intro to Christianity. And I took her class. She was also my advisor. And I remember her talking about this new major that Campbell was coming up with. It's actually a religion major, but it's part of the religion major that had an emphasis in Christian ministry. And I was like, I think I can do this thing. And then we'll just see where it goes. And I remember walking up to Glenn Jonas, who is still the chair of the religion department, or was at the time. I actually don't know now. And I remember asking him, what am I doing? And how do I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing? And I remember him saying, and this is coming from a very academic setting. This is, again, the chair of the religion department. This is supposed to be an academic religion department. And I remember him saying with his pastor voice, he put his pastor hat on for a second, because he does a lot of interim pastorates. And he said, Gavin, if there's a window or if there's a door that's open, you just got to take it. And if you go that way, you open that window, you open that door, you go through it, and you realize this is not where I'm supposed to be or what I'm not supposed to be doing, then you take the next one. And I remember clinging to that whenever I was making this major choice, because it ended up changing the direction of my life, because I didn't know what I was doing. And it kind of pushed me. If you've ever known me, I'm one that loves to make important decisions. And I love to do them independently. There's a little bit of sarcasm there. I love to ask everyone's thoughts around the decision before I make it. Just because I like to think of all my options. But I remember that push. Gavin, you just got to do it. You just got to jump. Go through the door, start taking a step. And God will show you if this is the path to take or not. And I do remember that as like a pivotal moment, like a flip the script kind of situation where I didn't exactly know where things were going. And I did it. And it ended up being an awesome thing. It's how I got to the place I am now in life, and the career choices and the leading of God's life, God's direction on my life. And all of these things have worked out to be pretty awesome. And because I had that conversation with Dr. Glenn Jonas at Campbell University.
I love Dr. Jonas. He's awesome.
Yeah, I'll go next. I was trying to figure out what part of my story to share with you all, but it's kind of difficult because truly when it comes to flipping the script, I feel like, just like you were talking about going through these open doors, Gavin, I feel like God's constantly like, here's the next page of that script. Oh, you thought that was it? No, here's the next. What's that? Another page. So I'm kind of like, where do I go with that? But just to share some of those kind of page turn moments with you briefly, I'll just say, I've got some kind of mile markers is what I call them in my life. One of them would be, I shared with you all in a previous staff chat, feeling called to the ministry and how that worked for me. And so when I started looking at schools, I started thinking, okay, I'm called to ministry. Music wasn't on my mind at all. Music was always just kind of a hobby that I had. My family always did music together, that kind of thing. And so I started looking at, communications majors, thinking I'm going to be a preacher, whatever, all that kind of stuff. And then God just, was like, oh, really? That's what you're going to do? Flip the script, and got me to this awesome school studying, voice performance is what I got my major in, and music theory and all this kind of stuff, and really took me down the traditional music minister road. And then halfway through getting those degrees, I, started kind of experimenting around a little bit with contemporary music, contemporary worship, or whatever you want to call that. And so I, auditioned to start leading worship for the Baptist Collegiate Ministries band, and led worship with them for a few years and everything. This whole time I've been working as a traditional music minister, leading choirs in 2 different churches and handbells. Stephen, you didn't hear that, and all kinds of stuff. And so I was like, okay, traditional music ministry, I guess, is what I'm going to do. Then I started leading worship in a contemporary setting and really just fell in love with that and was like, this is super awesome. This is great. So that's yet another page turn, and then when I started, right when I graduated college, I did an internship in Texas and then moved back up here for a job co-planting a church in Knoxville with a guy named Joel, the church at Sturkey Hills. And there was nothing traditional about that. That was like, if I was to compare that church now to a church here, it would probably be, I don't even know what, just a very modern church. And so I was the worship director for that church for 3 years and loved every minute of it. Thought it was awesome. I was like, okay, great. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do traditional stuff anymore. I'm going to be, a modern worship pastor. And sure enough, God was like, yeah, check this out. And brought me to another church in Knoxville, felt called there and worked there. It was a very traditional church that kind of had 2 services and was really experimenting with modern worship just a little bit. And I was like, okay, I guess this is what I'm going to do now. And then, really long story short, wound up feeling like this probably isn't the right fit for me. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just a modern worship pastor. That's just what I need to do. That's just where I need to be. I just need to work at a full modern church. That's my bread and butter these days. That's what I know. And then God was like, oh, really? First Baptist Wilmington. Ever heard of that? And so sure enough, we came out here, Muriel and I came out here and everything. And truthfully, it was a discerning moment for us because we came to a rehearsal and, 3 or 4 years ago, I guess that was about 4 years ago, the modern service at First Baptist looked totally different than it does now. And I kind of felt like, based on the conversations I'd had, I knew the direction that this church wanted to go in and felt confident in the abilities God gave me to move in that direction, but I wasn't totally sure that was what you all wanted. And so we're sitting there and, I'm watching this rehearsal and I'm like, this is the most traditional modern service I think I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not sure I'm going to be a good fit here. I'm not sure this is going to work out. And I remember I got up to go to the restroom and then Muriel got up to go to the restroom in the middle of this rehearsal and followed me. She's like, that's all she did. She just kind of looked at me. She didn't say anything. And I was like, I know. We'll pray about it. We'll figure it out. It'll be fine. I'm not sure this is where we're going to wind up. Not sure this is where we need to be, but and then over the course of the next 2 to 3 months, God just fully turned that page, made it very evident. This is where I want you all to be. I want you to be here. And that was affirmed by, the congregation at First Baptist, affirmed by that search team. And that's just been another moment. So yeah, my script keeps flipping on me. So here we are.
Yeah, I was extremely comfortable 5+ years ago in the beautiful mountains of Western North Carolina. Could not have been happier. 5 years away from having my house paid off and hopefully looking at an early retirement. I still can't believe it's true, but I happen to have the longest tenure of anybody ever in the history of First Baptist Church in Waynesville. And, pride can really get a hold of you sometimes when those are your benchmarks. And, you've seen children get born, get married, go off to college. I mean, the whole thing is just, everything was just great there. And I don't know what happened, but next thing you know, I find myself in a conversation with First Baptist Church of Wilmington through a mutual acquaintance. And it just was supposed to happen. I've never seen anything that just clicked or just flipped like, you are supposed to do this. And I don't know that it even dawned on me that I was moving from a place that occasionally might see 85 degrees to a place that normally gets 95 degrees with 98% humidity. It didn't dawn on me until I moved here on August 1st in 2015, and it was hotter than heck. And I remember saying to Melinda, we're walking up the 3rd flight of steps of this apartment complex. We're in hell. and it was just, but joking aside, man, a lot of change had to take place for God to get my attention. And I am so thankful that he did. I am so thankful that an opportunity opens itself up. And I tell you this too, the church is magnificent, and I love First Baptist Church Wilmington, and my heart is here. But probably more important than that to me is this group right here in the staff chat. It is great to work with you guys. This is the best team. This is the best collaboration of giftedness as well as differences. Every one of us, we're not cookie cutter people. We all have our differences, but yet together, God just does a great thing through us. And I'm just tickled that script got flipped for me to be able to be a part of you and this marvelous staff team. I thank God for that every single day.
Thank you, John. I'm glad your script got flipped too. Mine I was going to share one, but then as you were talking, something else came to my mind that I think is equally as important. And it has to do with pride. I feel like before I became on staff with the church, I had a job where I traveled a lot, and I was in the car a lot. I traveled Monday through Thursday, and you can only listen to music for so long, as much as I love music. So I got into talk radio, and just all of that. I grew up in a home that was very strict. And so I felt like I was always sort of fighting for my voice, if that makes any sense. And I'm sure, all kids probably feel like that. Most kids do. But I just needed to figure out what I believed about things. And, I was I wasn't shy about sharing what I believed about things. I felt like I was, Gavin, I didn't need to ask 15 people what to do. I knew what to do, and I was going to do it. That was just sort of my kind of, and I feel like I sort of developed this mindset of there's a right and a wrong way. And while I do believe that there are some things that are black and white, I used to believe everything was black and white. I used to believe there was very little gray. And particularly when it came to faith and how people come to know Christ and how people live out their faith and how that just works in this world. I used to think there was a way, and what I feel like what God has done in my life is flip the script and made that so much of a broader view of what it means to follow Christ. And I think, being on staff with all of you and getting to walk with people and learn and be in relationship with other believers has been what's done that. And I think the other thing where God has flipped the script for me is worry. And you may think I'm still a worrier, but I used to really be a worrier. I used to be really anxious about things, and I would like not anxious to the point that it would like have me in knots, keep me up all the time. I felt like I could somehow control it, or I could somehow do something about it. And not to say I still don't have those tendencies, but in 2006, when I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, I felt like the Lord just did a huge switch in my life and just allowed me to put that worry in his lap and to just have complete trust and complete faith. And every time I try to take it back, something happens to remind me that that's where I need to be. I need to be in complete trust and let him hold the worry, And so I feel like those are two big things. Other, lots of other things too, but two big things in my life that have been flipped because of trying to follow Christ more fully. So I really appreciate everybody sharing today. And I really enjoyed this sermon series, even though we're only halfway through it. Jim's sermon on Blessed Are the Meek was something that really spoke to me. I think in this time that we do find ourselves in, it's so easy to want to retreat or to lash out, one or the other. And leaning in love is probably what we ought to be doing. And so I really appreciate this sermon series, and I hope it's speaking to everyone else like it's speaking to me. So, all right, guys, thanks for being with us today. Everybody say bye.